and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. On December 2nd, at the Monroe County Election Board meeting, County Clerk Nicole Brown explained the ongoing debate with the Monroe County Commissioners over the future of Election Central.
I was asking for the entirety of the Johnson Hardware building, is that needle has moved very little. You may recall from a recent work group meeting, efforts made on the record to ensure that the election board understood the answer to the original request for the entirety of the Johnson Hardware building. From my perspective, there were only three possible options in terms of an answer to the question. The options as I see them are yes, no, or not yet. Chairwoman Rana, I appreciate your efforts to secure one of those responses. My takeaway was that there was nothing but obfuscation on the part of the board. They wouldn't say yes, they wouldn't say no, they wouldn't say not yet. I understood that the answer to the request was no for 2022, but of course that only gets us through 2022. It doesn't allow for us to do any advanced planning.
Brown said that the commissioners have not given her as much time on their agenda as the other boards.
Other presenters are encouraged to present as long as they like, but I am asked to be brief. If the topic is playgrounds or parks or projects that would make the county more beautiful, and I am not saying that those things are not important, you get the happy, smiley, agreeable commissioners nodding their heads in affirmation. When I present about expanding the footprint at the Johnson Hardware building, I am met with the resting tough faces.
Brown said she has been working on satellite locations, but has only gotten bipartisan approval for the Johnson Creamery building. Brown acknowledged the board's past success with the 2020 election and said they are moving forward with the commissioner's proposal to look into the former Napa Auto Parts building.
Here's the truth. The 2020 elections were difficult, but I am proud to say that with all of the challenges we faced, we still oversaw the second highest voter turnout for a presidential election in Monroe County. It was second only to the election in which Barack Obama was elected president. With all of that being said, I'll put you in remembrance that I am on record as being amenable to utilizing the old Napa space for 2022 to store our voting equipment and to conduct poll worker training, and the space on the north end of the Showers building for absentee ballot requests that come by mail. Following the work group meeting, the most recent one, Mr. Crone came by to inquire as to when we might want him to make arrangements for us to see the Napa building. I presume that the most logical time would be following this meeting so that we could recess rather than adjourn and discuss the security needs for that space. And I look forward to meeting with whomever is available to do so.
The election board will meet again on January 6th. At the Monroe County Health Department Town Hall held on December 1st, Dr. Carol Talukian, Dr. Scott Moore, and Dr. Jason Simmons shared information and answered questions residents have on the COVID-19 vaccination for children. Dr. Talukian explained how the mRNA vaccine works to address parents' concerns over how it would affect their children.
A lot of people have concerns because this is an mRNA vaccine. mRNA stands for messenger RNA, and that's all it is. It's just a messenger. It's not the virus. It's not anything that can cause you to get infected. You can't transmit it to anyone. It's just a messenger. It tells your body to make the spike protein, which is not the infectious virus, not the virus, just the surface of the virus, and then your body can make antibodies. It does not interact with DNA. It cannot go in the nucleus and combine with your DNA. mRNA is a very short-lived thing. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Okay, it's very short-lived, doesn't last long in your body. It doesn't interfere with fertility or pregnancy because it can't get into your DNA. And we've actually, everyone thinks this technology is so new, but this has been going on for decades, and these vaccines have been in development for decades. We just needed a really good pandemic to get it going. And that's basically what happened. So it's a good vaccine. It doesn't cause disease. It doesn't change your DNA. But that's all it is. It's just a messenger.
Residents submitted questions asking whether their child should still get the vaccine if they have previously had COVID. Dr. Simmons said that they should.
Yes, they should still get the vaccine. COVID itself, the immunity varies for that. So you may not get as long-lasting immunity as you might get from the vaccine. So there's no need to wait. The only contraindication is if you've had this MIS-C that we will talk about later, that you should wait at least the 90 days after if you've been diagnosed with that. Also, just waiting until your quarantine period is over. So if you've had COVID, obviously you don't want to be out exposing people. So wait until you feel better. But at that point, you can go ahead and get the COVID vaccine.
Another question that was submitted asked if the adult dose of the vaccine is different from the children's dose. Simmons answered that the child dose is smaller.
It's a third of the adult dose, so it is a smaller dose. And as a result of that, I think we are seeing less side effects in the 5 to 11 age than we do in the older kids. Not that there can't be some side effects, but I think overall we definitely see less. And I've not had from personal reports, any of my patients report significant side effects from the vaccine. So the buffer, so tromethamine is the buffer. And so that is what allows the vaccine to be stored at more, at not as cold temperatures, so we can keep them in our office for a longer period of time.
For those seeking further information, the full recording of the meeting and the answers to all of the resident submitted questions can be found at www.catstv.net. And we'll have more Cats Week after this message.
I'm at risk of thinking there's just no point in trying.
I'm at risk of looking in the mirror and hating what I see.
I'm at risk of being told not to tell.
But with Girls Inc. in my corner,
I will not be another statistic.
I will fight for myself.
With you in my corner, I will win.
Fuel her fire and she will change the world. Girls Inc.
Welcome back to Cats Week. On December 1st, at the Bloomington City Council meeting, the council discussed approving a Sibling City partnership with Palo Alto, California. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton introduced the resolution and explained why he supports it.
A domestic sibling city, a relationship, a pairing between cities within the United States is a new idea, new to me, and I think new to most of us. You'll hear shortly from Vicki Venker, who has been one of the leading voices about this and trying to move this forward in the country. And you'll hear more, but the idea really is to help knit our country back together, help create relationships kind of across different regions of the country. We all know how much stereotyping and sense of division that we can see in different ways within our own country. And I have to tell you, when I first heard of this concept, I loved it. The idea of municipalities, communities in the country helping to do our work at the ground level to build relationships, knit us together, create linkages that will strengthen our communities, but frankly, also our country.
Palo Alto Mayor Tom Dubois said he was excited about the cities sharing ideas and forming relationships. Founder of Sibling Cities USA, Vicki Venker, attended Indiana University and lives in Palo Alto. She believes both cities have a lot to offer each other.
I truly believe that if Americans get to know each other better, we will get along better. So Sibling Cities USA provides a framework for these relationships. We call it the 3 C's of connection: community, commerce, and civil discourse. The first, community, involves community groups, students, and more getting to know each other. The second, commerce, allows the business communities to compare notes and explore opportunities. And then once we get to know each other, the third, civil discourse, will help us have respectful conversations across the miles to build understanding around the tough issues facing our nation. Sibling Cities USA has a national advisory board that can help. It includes a former cabinet secretary and a former national NAACP president. 3 of our advisors have led national bridge building organizations, and 2 others are renowned professors with expertise in gender equity, class issues, and civil rights. So these 2 cities would be the first city pair, but not the last.
During public comment, President of the Economic Development Corporation, Jen Pearl, supported the connection with Palo Alto and said technology and innovation are growing in the region and could benefit from the partnership. Bloomington resident Greg Alexander expressed concern over the city's partnership with Palo Alto, which he said he did not want anything to do with.
I'm a computer programmer by trade, so are a lot of my friends. And so when I was a recent college graduate, I visited San Francisco and Santa Cruz and Mountain View and San Jose and all that stuff a bunch of times. And a lot of my friends moved there. Every last one of those friends, as they became mature, even if they didn't have kids, as they became mature, they left the Bay Area because it just costs so much. It's not a city I want to emulate. It's a city I consciously decided not to move to. And one of the times I went, I took Caltrain, which is a great service. It runs from downtown San Francisco, pretty much just south of Market, all the way down to, I don't know where the southern terminus is, but it goes at least through San Jose. And you're sitting on the train and you're looking out the window and you're looking at people's backyards. You're looking at suburbs, at single family houses on quarter-acre lots directly on the train line. And you see the stops, Mountain View, Cupertino, Palo Alto. And the stops are on neighborhood streets, essentially. There's this concept called transit-oriented development, where when you have a transit line like Caltrain that could connect literally millions of workers to millions of jobs, that you build the apartments right by the train station. But they didn't do that in Palo Alto. They didn't do that in Mountain View. They didn't do that in Cupertino. And when we ask about upzoning here, it's hard to prove, just build more and it becomes affordable. That doesn't actually work, because you build more, it does become relatively more affordable, but it's such a desirable place to live because you built more that, of course, it doesn't become cheap. But Palo Alto exists to prove that if you don't build more, it will become fantastically unaffordable. They have a land area actually slightly larger than Bloomington, but a population 10,000 people less. That's a catastrophe. Do you know how many people want to live in Silicon Valley? And they literally can't, because of if you literally have 500 square miles of single family zoning, which Palo Alto is right in the middle of, you can't have affordable housing. Even people who are making $250,000 a year are finding it very hard to buy a starter home. And I just looked today on Zillow to see what does the real estate market look there. And I found the cheapest, the absolute cheapest house on the market in Palo Alto is $500,000. And this isn't $500,000. That's a lot more affordable than I expected. So I started looking into it. It's a trailer, $500,000 for a trailer. And so I don't think that's a city I want to have anything to do with, to be honest. Is a city that I don't like. I look at it as a failure of the American dream. The people who bought into that city 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago are wealthy on their land investment, but that's not a place I want to live. That's not a place where the people that work there can live there. And it's not a place that can be an effective bedroom community even for San Francisco. So I don't know what the point is. I don't know what you should do, but I absolutely oppose Palo Alto itself.
Councilmember Steve Volan supported the partnership, but acknowledged Alexander's concerns.
I generally tend to look for cities that are more like Bloomington in that they are standalone metropolitan areas, whereas Palo Alto is part of a large metropolitan area. But I think that is why we can learn something from them, because they as part of a larger metropolitan area, there are some things that are different. I'm not going to deny some of the things Mr. Alexander said about the city. It is very expensive. But in case nobody's checked, there's a nationwide housing crisis. Housing is very expensive here as well. I think that all in all, this is a good opportunity to learn from a city that is in fact comparable to us.
President Jim Sims and Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith also supported the partnership. The City Council voted unanimously to approve the Sibling City relationship. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
Let's talk about sex.
What is consent?
And what's not?
Consent is based on choice.
Consent is active, not passive.
Consent is giving permission without feeling pressure.
What is not consent?
silence,
Passed out.
intoxicated.
Fear.
It is not consent.
Got consent?
Ask.
Sex without consent is a crime. Only yes means yes.
Welcome back to CATSweek. On December 1st, the Monroe County Board of Zoning Appeals considered a petition for a truck stop on Victor Pike in Perry Township. The zoning violation is based on the fact that the business did not have the board's approval to operate a truck stop. However, petitioner Mike Carmen said that when the business was bought by P&G Associates, the truck stop was a part of the gas station's intended design.
P&G Associates bought this property at 5100 South Victor Pike in 2005. The use is ongoing at that time, which they've continued since, was diesel and gasoline fuel sales, a convenience mart, and overnight truck vehicle equipment parking. The overnight truck parking primarily was long-haul truck drivers who were taking break, rest, sleep opportunities, so they parked there. That use had been in place through the time that this property had been developed, starting in with Alan Terry, the original developer of this property, who acquired it with his wife Beverly in 1988. And sometime within the next year or two, I think the exact date of starting the business is not clear, but it happened within a year, 2 years at the most. They developed what Alan called a truck stop business. I will tell you, I hesitate using that term, but that's the term that he used. That's the term that's in a statement by Mrs. Terry that's as part of the appeal packet. But I hesitate to use that term only because the zoning ordinance now has a truck stop, truck plaza, or travel plaza definition that is much more extensive on what it is compared to the truck stop that Alan Terry envisioned that has been in place since then. His express intended use was to develop a site on the west side of Bloomington for diesel fuel sales. And in doing that, they put in the pumps, they created the gasoline and diesel fuel cells, had a small building there out of which they actually had a small kitchen in which they ran a little bit of a cafe. They did convenience sales, a lot of, according to the statement of Mrs. Terry, Alan Terry now is deceased, but his widow, Beverly Terry, who worked in the business daily during the time they owned it, workwear suits, sales of boots and other apparel, and some food items and convenience items. And that Alan had constantly and intentionally courted truck drivers to use the area for overnight parking for rest, because it would add to fuel sales and sales from either from their little in-house kitchen or cafe, whatever you want to call it, and other convenience sales. So as part of his business model.
Petitioner Carmen asserted that the truck stop should be permitted moving forward because it has been allowed for 30 years. He presented a lawsuit that Perry Township filed in 1987 about the truck and automobile parking that was settled, but allowed uses in existence to continue as it were. Monroe County Planning Director Larry Wilson pushed back against the petitioner's assertion that the truck stop was approved in the settlement.
This was a limited business. Mr. Waterford, who owned the property prior to the Terrys, came into and had the property rezoned from agricultural. He asked for general business. The commissioners zoned it limited business. These are the uses that, on the screen that are permitted by limited business. As you can see, there's not a convenience store, there's not a truck stop. However, there is gasoline service station, and there is parking area, public or employee. And if you go down to the definitions for these uses, this is very important. The ordinance says here, ordinance 8619, which is the 86 ordinance. It was in effect until 1980 or 1997. It says, except as provided, no building or premises shall be used for any purpose other than permitted in the zoning district in which the building or business is located. No land or lot area shall be used or diminished so that the yards or open spaces are smaller than prescribed. Only uses permitted in the limited business district could have been established legally on the site.
He said the site is permitted to be a fueling station for semi-trucks. However, that does not include overnight parking. Board member Skip Daly asked why this is the first time in 30 years it has been addressed. Wilson said that the planning department is complaint-based and does not have the capacity to uncover and enforce all misuse cases. Wilson explained the methodology of how he researched the zoning violation.
Here's what I do. I look at the aerial photographs that have a history of the project. I go through the zoning ordinance to see what zoning ordinance was in effect at the time the business began. I look through our records because the one concern I have is that I think if we'd approved a site plan, if they filed a site plan for this, if they had filed an improvement location permit application for their gasoline service station, and we approved it, and on that application, it said overnight parking of trucks, I think at that point, we might be stopped from challenging it. They did not, or at least there's no records. We have no records from that time period, other than the fact that this is what the ordinance says. And again, I don't have the power to change the terms of the ordinance. When it says automobile parking only, it means what it says. And when it says parking of trucks less than 1.5 tons, it means what it says. That is why we established a conditional use for truck stops, because we had no provision for overnight parking of trucks or for even short-term parking of trucks. If you look around the county, there's no gas station that has parking for trucks. You know, this is the only one that has been allowing parking for trucks. And again, my determination does not preclude them from continuing sales of diesel fuel and gasoline to semi-trucks. It's the long-term overnight parking of semi-trucks, of utility service vehicles, of contractors' vehicles, of milk trucks, and so on. That's not allowed under the ordinance or the pre-existing business ordinance.
During public comment, Monroe County resident Tommy Blaze supported the petitioner and said that he does not mind the overnight truck parking.
I grew up across the street. My wife's family previously owned the gas station. When they were operating the truck stop, they let trucks park there overnight, and they never really had any problems. For the 20 years I lived in the area, I never really had any problems with any noise from overnight parking. And I know Rosie and Pilo are the owners, the type of people to just want to make sure truckers have a safe place to get a rest and a good meal. And since the station has stopped overnight parking, I noticed a lot of truckers have resorted to parking on the sides of large interstates. And that's obviously not safe. I don't think it's fair that we as people really enjoy how fast we can get things now, but we don't give the truckers the decency of safe and reasonable parking.
Resident Jeff Morris said that he has concerns about the gas station.
My family and I live across the street from the gas station, and I spoke last month about some of my concerns. So I wanted to speak up again this month since my concerns remain unchanged. I wanted to mention a couple points from the lawsuit settlement that was shown earlier, as there are specific requirements outlined to protect the neighbors. A couple of examples are, and I'm paraphrasing, evergreens were supposed to be planted every 12 feet along sides of the property adjacent to neighbors. Nearly all of these have been cut down in recent years. The entire parking lot was supposed to be paved within a couple of years of the settlement, and the parking lot has been expanded multiple times since then, and the parking areas are now primarily gravel. Also, it clearly states in the settlement that all requirements listed are passed on to succeeding owners. As was mentioned, this site is zoned pre-existing business, and under the pre-existing business designation set in the 90s, the intensity of the site may not increase. In looking at satellite images in the packet and looking over the requirements in the settlement, it's undeniable that the parking area and intensity has greatly increased since the 90s. In fact, just last week, I looked out my front door and noticed another couple of dump truck loads of fill had been dumped on the northern edge of the property. This is the exact same way the parking lot expansion on the eastern part of the property started back in 2019. A few dump truck loads of fill here and there, and eventually there's another parking lot expansion that's been completed. If this intensity increase had followed the proper channels, adjacent property owners would have had a chance to speak up. However, when it's completed slowly over time behind the scenes, it bypasses the process that was designed to be inclusive and transparent to everyone impacted. As I've said before, I support the permitted use of the gas station. However, the slow changes over time that don't meet the county standards should not be permitted. Approving truck parking at this site only rewards the behavior of this slow, under the radar approach to growth. This is not respectful to the neighborhood and is not respectful to any other Monroe County resident or business owner who abides by the rules. Thank you.
The board voted 2-3 on the appeal, which means that the zoning use for overnight parking at the gas station on Victor Pike is not permitted. At the Monroe County Commissioners meeting on December 1st, Board of Health Director Penny Cottle updated the commissioners on the Omicron COVID variant preparation.
With the identification of Omicron, the new variant of concern, I know that there are many, many questions about that, and we don't have many answers for that right now. We are waiting to get more details and information as our scientists are looking at that and trying to get those answers for us. But there are some things that we do know. We know that vaccination is still needed. We know that wearing your mask is still needed. Washing your hands, keeping your hands away from your face, staying home if you're sick, if you have a fever, you're symptomatic, you've been diagnosed, following quarantine guidelines. If you are unvaccinated and you're in close contact, stay home. If you are vaccinated and you're a close contact, you do not have to quarantine, but you still need to monitor, and it's advised that you get tested after day 5, probably between day 5 and 7 is ideal. The more the virus circulates, the greater the ability to mutate into new variants, and the greater the risks that eventually our vaccines will not be as protective as they currently are. We don't need to let that happen, and we have ways around that, and it's vaccination.
Monroe County Prosecuting Attorney Erica Oliphant presented a one-time federal grant that would give Adult Protective Services staff members a bonus for their work during the pandemic. She said that amidst the quarantine, Adult Protective Services staff still conducted home visits during a time without personal protection equipment and vaccinations.
Adult Protective Services staff only conducted a few home visits, but at that time, personal protective equipment was not widely available. There were many unknowns about COVID-19. There was no vaccine available, and many of the potential endangered adults are high risk, as are some of the staff in my Adult Protective Services unit. The end of quarantine did not signal the end of stress regarding known and unknown risks associated with COVID-19. Adult Protective Services staff could not get vaccinated until February of 2021, meaning that for nearly a year, the investigators and the director were in close contact with people during home visits with little protection from infection. Adult Protective Services staff had to make phone calls and complete paperwork associated with services and benefits for our endangered adults and those under investigation that they would not normally be responsible for. Because some of our partner agencies were not operating at the same capacity or with the same procedures as they normally do. The increased risk of the jobs combined with the increased tasks and responsibilities, all of which are direct results of COVID-19 pandemic, have caused low morale and feelings of burnout among our small staff.
Commissioner Penny Githens said that she was appreciative that the staff continued to work under such stressful conditions.
I'm just really thankful that the staff continue to take care of such a vulnerable population. I feel like they deserve this.
The county commissioners voted unanimously to approve the federal grant. The next county commissioners meeting will be held on December 8th. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.